my name is Ayla Tesler-Mabe. Whether you were first introduced to the masterpiece Bohemian Rhapsody from the movie with Rami Malek, or you've been a Queen fan for decades, or you've seen the music video that came out 7 years before MTV was even created, or you discovered the brilliance of the song in the car scene of Wayne's World, we all can agree that Bohemian Rhapsody is epic. The song itself clocks in barely below 6 minutes and had sold more than 1 million copies within a few months of its release. It's a symphonic rock masterpiece that follows a pretty unconventional structure with an intro, a ballad segment, a guitar solo, an operatic passage, and a hard rock ending, and a reflective coda after that. Freddie Mercury himself said that it was basically 3 songs he wanted to put out, so he just put the 3 songs together. Now, right before the classic opera section of the song is Brian May's absolutely iconic, exquisite solo. And Brian May, of course, played it on his custom-made guitar, the Red Special, that he built with his father in the 60s. In this video, I'm going to break down the elements that make Brian May's solo just so good. We're going to talk not only about the notes themselves that he played, but how he actually played. Because if Brian May is one thing, he is a master of making the guitar sound ridiculously beautiful. So let's dive in. Here's the opening line. So, what's going on here? Starting at the 8th fret of the D string. And what's funny is when I listen to this solo with the whole track, it kind of sounds like he's just playing it once. But if you listen to the solo isolated, you can hear it quite clearly. He's actually playing that 8th fret 2 times. And of course, it would help if you add some subtle vibrato on that note, because that's just a Brian May staple. There is going to be a lot of beautiful vibrato to take note of in this solo. And once you've done that, what we do is we play the 10th fret of the G string, bring it down, and you pull off to the 8th fret. And if you can, instead of simply bending that note up, try to pre-bend it slightly, meaning you already move the string up a little bit before you actually pick the note. It's super subtle, but it's a detail to try and include if you can, because I think that's what I hear. And then, this is what we have next. You land on the 11th fret of the B string. Definitely want some nice vibrato on that note. And then you play the 8th fret. And you come up to the 11th fret again with a very slow, wide vibrato. Brian May staple. Now if we put everything together, this is what we have. Next line sounds like this. So, come up to the 13th fret of the B string, and I think there's a very subtle rake up to this note. So instead of simply picking that 13th fret, you kind of move up to it. And of course, you want to be very careful to avoid pinch harmonics and kind of ugly sounds as you're raking up to it. It can be hard to get it the way Brian May does. But hopefully it sounds like that, where it's more subtle, and it just adds a little bit more, I don't know, extra something to that note. And if you can, put a little vibrato on that 13th fret. And then you play 15, 16. Back to that 13th fret with a little vibrato. Walking back up 15, 16. So now we have Brian May staple. You want to bend the 16th fret a whole step, but what you're going to do is actually pre-bend the note. So again, you're actually bending it up to that pitch before you even pick it, which is pretty challenging to do. But again, if you want to be able to play like Brian May, it's kind of an essential technique to get down. And not only that, if you thought that was already challenging, you want vibrato on that bend as well. It's just so soulful and beautiful. And you put it all together and it will hopefully sound something like this. Here's the next phrase. You're gonna come up to the 17th fret of the G string. And if you can, make that note a little bit subtler than the rest of the phrase. It sounds like dynamically he starts the phrase a little bit lower, and then that gives, the potential for the phrase to sort of blossom as he goes through. And I'll talk a little bit more about dynamics in a second, because that's such an important part of the solo. But here's the line. You play the 17th fret of the G string, 18th fret of the B string, and then you walk up 15, 16, 18 on the high E string, and another classic pre-bend with lots of vibrato, all the way up here on the 18th fret, whole step bend. And now that I'm talking a little bit about dynamics, it's such a beautiful solo because of how connected it is to emotion. Every single note feels like it just came from like the most deep crevices of Brian May's heart. I think the whole song reflects that too in, Freddie Mercury's vocal performance, everything going on. But don't be afraid to really diversify the dynamics of each phrase, where you could have the first note of the phrase be really small and then immediately follow it with a much more, powerfully played note. Because it just adds to that kind of like human expression through the guitar feeling that I get when I listen to this solo, more than maybe most other solos I've heard. And obviously the vibrato is a huge part of that. And once you bend up on this 18th fret, you actually don't release it right away. The next phrase begins with that bend releasing. This is the phrase in the solo that might intimidate the most people, but it's beautiful, it's worth working on. You might find it easier than you think, so let's talk about it. So like I said, it starts with a release of that bend, where you actually pick it as you release it. And then, this is what we have next. You end up playing 16, 15, back to 16, and then a little bit of a trill from 15 to 16. And when I say trill, I mean you're hammering on from 15 to 16 and then pulling off back to 15. And then we have this. You play 18 on the B string, 15 on the high E string again, and then you play a very similar phrase, now on the B string, 18, 16, 15, back to 16 again, and then a trill from 15 to 16. Back to 15. Now, if you're like myself and you get kind of confused when people talk about fret numbers like that, let me just play it for you slowly, because that might be an easier way to learn it. So this is what we have. And then we end with 17 on the G string, 15 on the B string, 15 on the G string. And this one, it's pretty important to use, the ring finger to your middle finger to your index finger, just because it makes this movement a lot easier. The timing is super difficult, especially of this phrase, because like I said, it's so connected to Brian May's soul, honestly. I don't even know how else to put it, that there isn't really a consistent timing. It's like certain parts of the phrase speed up and slow down. It's just so expressive. What it sounds like to me is the first part of the phrase is a little bit faster, and then it kind of slows down as he descends. And I think the best thing you could do is take note of where he lands. and see if you can land in the same place, but maybe you can get through the phrase in your own unique way, and just sort of, again, think about the emotion first, and then hopefully your playing will follow that. Because honestly, I don't think I can sit here and teach you the timing of this phrase perfectly, but hopefully it would sound a little something like this. Now the next phrase, again, it feels very classical to me, and a lot of Brian May's playing really feels that way to me. It sounds like this. And again, we're sort of ending up with the same timing issue as before. It's not really an issue. It's just emotively and tastefully in its own time. And it's gonna be hard to teach the timing to you, so I'm just gonna focus on the notes first, where we start with a very subtle rake. Again, you're just sort of muting with your fretting hand, kind of playing the G string on its own. This isn't a detail that has to be there, but it's a cool way to add a little extra character. And it'll also help you keep in time, because this phrase doesn't start right on the downbeat, so it can be helpful to kind of put something there so that you come in at the right time. And then you end up playing 15 to 17 on the G string. Walk up, 15, 16, 18 on the B string. And then you walk up 15, 16, 18 on the high E string. And definitely try to put some vibrato on that 18th fret. And then the phrase repeats again, sort of, with a bit of variation. Only this time, it ends with a beautiful bend on the 18th fret of the high E string, pre-bent with vibrato, same story as before. But again, the timing is what makes this so beautiful. I'll try to play it slowly. Again, this isn't gonna be totally in time with what Brian May does in the actual track. I would recommend looking up a version of the song, either just the song itself, or even the isolated guitar solo, if that would help you. And try putting it on 0.75 speed or 0.5 speed, and that might help you, really internalize the timing. But again, just follow how you feel as well. That's a hugely important part of it. It's all about feel with this solo. So yeah, enough talking. This is what it could sound like. And now let's put everything we have in the solo together slowly. And this is what it sounds like. Now, this is the next phrase. So again, we're coming down to the 15th fret of the B string, 16, 13th fret. And again, adding some vibrato on that 13th fret if you can. You play it 2 times in a row. Then you walk back up, 15, 16. Another pre-bend with vibrato on that 16th fret. Now we have playing 10, 12, 13 on the G string. See if you can add some vibrato on that 13th fret. Then you come up to the 13th fret of the high E string. And again, if you can put a little subtle vibrato there, wonderful. And then landing on that 13th fret of the G string again. Followed by the 14th fret of the B string. And what you're doing is mostly up to your picking hand. Just take note of, what direction I'm picking in. So you start with a downstroke, and then that sort of faster passage also starts with a downstroke. And very important, add some vibrato through it if you can. And then slide down. That's kind of fun, right? And the solo ends down here at the 6th fret of the G string. And there's a trill from 6 to 7. And then you play 9, 7 on the D string. And what's interesting about this phrase is you can have it more reliably ring out if you pick it, of course. But it seems to me like maybe there's not a lot of picking going on at all. And you only pick the very first note. And that's how you end up with such a smooth sound. And of course the hardest part of that is hammering on to that 9th fret of the D string. And when I'm hammering on, my fingers are a little bit flatter than they might normally be because ideally I'm muting things enough so that no other open strings ring out. And hopefully it'll sound cleaner that way. And that's the end of the solo. So now that we've discussed how to actually technically execute the solo, I want to talk a little bit more about its emotional intention. Because the solo follows the main vocal ballad section of the song, where Freddie Mercury sings about killing a man, facing the truth and questions the point of life. So the solo could be interpreted as an exploration of this sentiment, almost like the voice of the soul that is questioning. And Brian May's performance and choice of melody have arguably made this one of the most epic solos in rock history. The magic in this solo are the subtleties of what Brian May is doing to each note, in the approach and attack as he searches for the emotion in every single note. There are no wasted notes in this solo. So the reason I really wanted to make this lesson was there's so many resources on the internet, tabs, all sorts of great stuff like that. But sometimes it's interesting to delve into the technical aspects of how to make the notes actually sound like the musician. Because if I played the first phrase as written in the tab, obviously there's a lot missing, right? And it's kind of fun to talk about that in a lesson, so I did. And that's what this video was all about. So I hope you've enjoyed this lesson as much as I've enjoyed exploring the magic within Bohemian Rhapsody. Brian May, I think, is one of the most beautiful guitar players I've ever heard. I am endlessly inspired by him. With all that said, please feel free to leave a comment below with your favorite Queen song, your favorite Brian May solo, and I'd love to hear all about it. But for now, I bid you a great day, and I will see you soon, I hope.